Well, we've arrived at the dreaded spreadsheet. People get really scared when I talk about a spreadsheet, my clients do, because they think that means that they have to get, some kind of a fancy computer program and come up with all kinds of complicated analyses to figure out what their financial situation is. That's not true. It's really all you have to do is have a piece of paper and a pen and some values of your various assets. So to make this as easy as possible, I'm going to do it on a flip chart, which is kind of what lawyers do in the courtroom all the time, but it's pretty simple. We're going to put the value of your assets up on the spreadsheet, and then we're going to give you the opportunity to figure out how much debt you have on those assets, and then we're going to figure out what the net marital portion of your assets are, and we're going to talk a little bit about separate assets. And we've talked about all of these principles on the other videos, but now it's all going to come together. And it's important to see how it comes together, because once you see it on a piece of paper and it doesn't quite look so scary, I think it's going to make you feel way more confident about your ability to pull this together. So we've talked about assets. We're going to have a house, we're going to have retirement, we're going to have cars, we're going to have some separate assets and some community or marital assets. And once you see how they come together on the spreadsheet, I'm positive that you can do this for yourself. And as we've talked about a whole bunch, the most important part about being prepared for your divorce is to understand your finances, so that if you don't have a lawyer, you kind of know what you're talking about. But if you decide to hire a lawyer, you want to be able to save some money. You don't want to show up in your lawyer's office with a box of receipts and credit card statements and bank statements and hand it all over to your lawyer, because you're going to be paying someone a couple $100s an hour to figure out your assets for you. So this way, if you follow along with what I'm doing and then apply it to your own personal assets, when you go to your lawyer, if you end up having a lawyer, you're going to be really organized. And if you use the Divorganizer, that planner that we have available for you, that's going to make it even easier, because we lay the same thing out in the divorce planner that's called the Divorganizer. It's pretty much the same as what I'm going to do with this spreadsheet. So let's get started. Okay, this is where it all comes together. We're going to do a spreadsheet now. And I've put some categories on the spreadsheet, and this is just a flip chart so that you guys can see it. And we have there will be an asset, such as a house. There'll be the value of that asset, which is what it's worth. And then sometimes we have debt on our assets. So that would be a mortgage or a car loan or something. And we subtract the debt from the value, and that gives us the net value. And then we talked a little bit earlier about separate property. And maybe you or your husband had separate property before you came into the marriage. So that's all going to go on the spreadsheet together. So let's get started. Let's say you have a house. And let's say your house is worth $300,000. And let's say that you owe $200,000. So that goes in as a negative. So the net value of your house is $100,000. And now you have a car. And let's say it's a 06 Honda. And that car is worth $16,000. And perhaps you have a car loan and you still owe $6,000 on that loan. So the net value of your car is 16 minus 6. So you have a net value in that car of $10,000. Now let's say before you got married, your husband had an old Mustang. But that wasn't paid for out of community money, and so that would be a separate asset of your husband's. So say it's worth $12,000. We're going to put that over here in the column of husband's separate property. We still want it on our spreadsheet even though it's separate property, so we know all the assets that you have as part of your marriage. Now, you have retirement, say your wife's retirement. And perhaps you have, let's say, $90,000. But you have been working in the same job for a long time, and so you earned part of that money before you were married. So under the net, this is the net marital value. Let's say there's $50,000 that you earned while you were married. And then let's say that before you got married, you were a good saver, and so you saved $40,000. So 40 of that is separate, 50 is community, for a total of $90,000. Maybe that's in a 401k or something. And then let's say the husband has retirement, but all of his retirement was earned while you were married. So let's say that his retirement was worth $80,000, and that all goes into the net marital column here. And then maybe there's a cabin. Maybe your husband's family had a cabin and he owned that cabin before you were married. So put husband for that. And that, you never paid any community money or any marital money went into that cabin. In most states, that's probably going to be considered a separate asset of the husband's. So we're going to put that over here, kind of under his Mustang. We're going to put, let's say it's worth $150,000. Now you have savings. And let's say that the savings was entirely earned during your marriage. So we're going to put that right over here. And let's say there's $20,000 in savings. And now we talked a little bit on the other video about valuing intangible assets like a business. And let's say for purposes of this discussion that you own a landscaping business. That's an asset that has to be valued. And we're going to say that that's a marital asset because that's a business that you had before you, or during the marriage. So we have to fill those in, but it's important to just know that on your spreadsheet that there's an asset that may need to be valued that we have to find a value for. And another type of asset that sometimes has to be valued would be a stock option. So let's say your husband works for a company and he has some stock options. That's another marital asset that needs to be valued, and that would go over here in the net value in the marital column. Now, perhaps you have a pension. Well, I'm not doing so good with my circles here. That's another value that you have to find the value of the pension, and you have to have what's called a pension valuation by a professional who knows how to do a pension valuation, so we can put that number onto the spreadsheet. We have to also take into consideration maybe you have some credit card debt. So let's say you have a Visa, and on the Visa, say you owe $15,000. So I'm going to put that in the debt column here. And let's say you have a MasterCard, I think it's called, and let's say you owe $10,000 on that. So those are negatives. So now we're going to add up the net marital assets, and if we add these up, if my math is right, it's about $260,000 of marital assets. But in order to know your net community value, you've got to subtract this $25,000 from the $260,000. So if we take the $25,000 off of the $260,000, I'm running out of room, and put that in negative because that's a minus, we have a net community of $235,000. Now we've done a spreadsheet, and let's just go over it again. We took the asset, we took the value of the asset, we subtracted off the debt, we came with a net value that belongs to the marital community, and then we also had to put in our separate property because it's important to list everything that you have. And just to reiterate, there's going to be some assets that you don't know the value of, like a business. Maybe the landscaping business is hugely successful and it has a big value, and maybe you just have 3 clients and it might not have so much value, if any. So we're back to issue spotting. So if you see that in your case there are stock options, you know those have to be put on the spreadsheet with some kind of a value. And if there's a pension, that's an asset that doesn't necessarily have the same value as it would show on the receipt that you get or the statement that you get. So we're issue spotting now. So if you know that there's a pension, you know that you've got to take a look at that and try to figure out what the value is, and you're probably going to have to get a forensic accountant to do that. Now some states treat, as we talked about before, treat separate and marital property differently, and some states even will consider debt to maybe be separate if it's in somebody else's name. And like I keep saying, I'm not qualified to practice law in every state, and I don't know all of the state laws in every single state, but for purposes of issue spotting, I think that we've covered most of the issues that you're going to have to take a look at when you put together your spreadsheet. Okay, it may not have been pretty, and I may not get everything exactly lined up right, but I'm absolutely positive that you can do this. I'm absolutely sure that you can figure out the values of your assets. I know that you can issue spot because we've talked about that a lot, and I know you can get this all down on a piece of paper. So what you need to do is get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, clear off your kitchen table, get out the box of all your receipts, take a piece of paper. You can do this: asset, value, debt, net value, which is your marital community, and the separate things that you think you might have. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and goodness knows it doesn't have to be pretty, because this isn't exactly pretty, but I know it's going to work.